Let's do it. Okay. Good morning, everybody. God, you guys are dead today. It's Wednesday. You still got another day to go. Don't go all fuzzy-headed on me now. It's still morning. All right. So let's try it again. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Ah, they're alive. Okay. So good morning. Welcome to today's presentation, Adding Intelligence to Your CI/CD with Spinnaker. Quick introduction to myself. I am Nick Chase. I am the head of content for Mirantis, and some of you may get the Open Cloud Digest that I put out every couple of weeks. I am a longtime application developer and troublemaker, which basically just means that I tend to use things in a way in which it was never intended for them to have been used. And you're going to see, you may see a little bit of that today. Currently, I am kind of focusing a bit on machine learning, as you can see. So you can check that out if you are interested in it. Let's take a quick look at what we're going to talk about today. First of all, before we go anywhere, raise your hand if you have heard of Spinnaker. Okay, keep your hand up if you've actually used Spinnaker. All right, close enough. Raise your hand if you know what Spinnaker is. All right, good. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a concept I'm calling intelligent continuous delivery. Raise your hand if you know what continuous delivery is. All right, good. Hey, you got to know your audience, you know? So, all right. I'm going to talk about this concept, intelligent continuous delivery, and we're going to see how to implement parts of it using Spinnaker. Do you have to use Spinnaker? No, but that happens to be what we're talking about today. All right, so let's talk about what intelligent continuous delivery is. When you are deploying your application, there are a number of things that you are taking into consideration when you're deciding where to put it. Is it going to be in your local data center? Is it going to be in the cloud? Is it going to be somewhere really close by or somewhere really far away? Is it going to be on some spare capacity on somebody's wearable halfway across the world? Or is it going to be on the laptop on your desk? There are way more choices now than there ever were before, and those are obviously multiplying every second. That doesn't even begin to take into account cost, performance, legalities, especially, coming up on, Friday, GDPR, all of that. So that's the first thing. Now, once you decide all of that, the best way to really get control of your infrastructure is with this notion of infrastructure as code. Now, nobody wants to have to wrangle all of their servers manually. I think we've all gotten well past that. The idea of infrastructure as code being that you define your infrastructure in a declarative way. This is what I want. I want this many servers, and I want them to do this, and I want them to be networked in this way, and so on and so forth. And it's not so much that you are defining what is, but you are defining what you want. That is able to be saved in version control. You can audit it. And most importantly, if lightning strikes your data center, you can replace it, okay? Now, in addition to all of that, in order to run in any kind of reasonable way, you need to have this coherent and comprehensive monitoring. You need to know if a drive is going to fail, or if a drive has already failed, if your network is down, if this server is down, whatever it is. You need to know if you're experiencing, say, a DOS attack. Has somebody messed with your servers and you don't, your integrity is gone. You need to know all of this stuff. And in order to do that, you need to have comprehensive monitoring going on. Now, intelligent continuous delivery is the idea of combining all of these things to give you a defined architecture so that you can replicate it. Make sure that it's flexible but controllable. So if you need to make changes, you can. But at the same time, nobody else can, that you don't want to, obviously. You need to have intelligent oversight of it so that you're not counting on somebody noticing that a drive is down. You know, it's great if you got monitoring that, you know, says, oh, drive is down. But if nobody knows that, what good is it? And all of that needs to be secure. And in a truly intelligent system, all of these things come together because your architecture can be analyzed, your monitoring detects when there are problems, and you can automatically or not so automatically make changes to, say, push up a fix or a patch or whatever. Okay, so we know that we can use Spinnaker for continuous delivery. All right, now we already know that Spinnaker is this orchestration tool and that it's a microservices application. We know all that. That's great. It's terrific. What you may or may not know already is that it works by creating these pipelines where you create various stages that define what it's going to do at any given time. And there are, you have the ability to do, say, templatized pipelines. For example, Mirantis application platform is based on Spinnaker, and one of the things that it includes is these templatized pipelines that are based on what you do every day. And you can give those pipelines to people so that they don't have to create those things out of whole cloth. Another thing that it does is it enables you to deploy specific artifacts. So you can create, say, you know, a VM or a Docker image or a Kubernetes manifest, whatever it is. These artifacts, you can create them and tell Spinnaker, OK, go ahead and deploy this. Now, Spinnaker has a good bit of intelligence already built into it. It enables you to do things like scaling server groups, like, you know, OK, I want to add, you know, if this happens, I want to add a server. Or if this happens, I want to increase this server group by, you know, 20%. Or scale this down when this pipeline runs, whatever. It enables you to manage these deployment strategies. You can set it up to, you know, a red-black deployment where you can switch over to a new server group, and keep the old one in place until you're sure that you really want to get rid of it because this one really does work, and then you can get rid of this one. Or if there's a problem over here, you can go back to the old one. It does canary deployments. These are all things that are intelligent, and that's great, and you should make use of them. But what we're going to talk about today is I want to kind of open your mind a little bit to places where we can add additional sources of intelligence that are not necessarily built directly into Spinnaker. And the places where we're going to do that, well, the places where we can do that are, you see them here. We've got artifacts, which I talked about, triggers, pipeline variables, conditional stages, and of course, Spinnaker has an API. So artifacts, you could, if you had some kind of logic built in, you could use that to conditionally build the artifact that then gets deployed. In a sense, that's what you're doing when you use Jenkins to build something with Jenkins pipeline, and then you tell Spinnaker, take this artifact and deploy it. For triggers, we can trigger pipelines off of a number of different things. You may or may not have seen triggering it with, say, oh, when somebody does a commit to GitHub, trigger this pipeline. We can trigger it with an arbitrary external script. We're going to see that. Pipeline variables enable you to see what's actually going on in the process so that you can react specifically to this exact execution. What is happening right now? You can create fairly complex pipelines based on the situation on the ground, so to speak. Spinnaker also has an API that you could, if you really wanted to, go ahead and script that directly. They're also putting together a CLI, from what I understand. Now, these are the three places where we are going to demo. Triggers, pipeline variables, conditional stages. All right. Some places where the intelligence comes from. We've got pre-coded logic. You could create your own application that creates that logic. You can use policy engines like, we're at OpenStack Summit, Congress. You could use Open Policy Agent. You can use artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you want. Quick note on machine learning. We're not going to talk about how to do those things, how to actually create the machine learning today. We're going to show how to use it once you've got it. But if you, by the way, are an OpenStack operator, I will ask you, please check out fault genes. This is an effort to kind of help get some automated knowledge of what's going on in OpenStack to help correct problems. All right, so we're going to go on with the demo. So everybody, please say a quick prayer to the demo gods. Let us move on here. So I am going to start out with we're going to do three different demos. We're going to trigger a pipeline, we're going to talk about pipeline variables, and we're going to talk about conditional stages. So we're going to start with triggering a pipeline. Why would we do this? Let's say we have a script that detects something that's going on outside, like a disaster or intrusion detection. You can have a script that predicts something that's going to happen before it actually happens and takes action. So we're going to start with triggering a Spinnaker pipeline from a webhook. Now, a webhook, raise your hand if you know what a webhook is. OK, good. So basically, for those who don't know, it's a URL you can call into to make something happen. That's the simplest way to put it. So in this case, I'm going to add a trigger. And you can see here, there are all kinds of things that we can trigger these pipelines with, cron jobs, Git, PubSub, et cetera. I'm going to use a webhook. And you'll notice here, this is kind of the basis for it. I am going to create, I forget what I called it now. What did I call it? OK, anomaly finder. I am going to create one called anomaly finder. All right, and you can add key value pairs so that it only gets triggered in that situation, but we're not going to do that right now. Just know that you can. And all right, so we can also go ahead and create a stage that records the fact that this was actually triggered. So I'm going to create a second webhook stage. I'm just going to call it record trigger. And I'm going to call a script that we will talk about in a minute, tech for mere mortals.com, and webhook record.php. OK. And I'll need to spell it correctly, because I don't have time to not spell it correctly. All right. In this case, we're going to send a post, and we're going to send a particular JSON payload. Okay? So we're going to say action trigger. All right. Now, let's go ahead and save this. While this is saving, we can take a quick look at the actual webhook. Nothing really fancy about this. We're just, yes, it's PHP. Yes, I know I'm at OpenStack and I should be using Python, but I'm not, so there. OK. Now, so we're just taking the payload, transforming it into JSON, pulling out the action, and recording it in a file. Now, let's see. We're almost done here. It does take like 30 seconds to save. Why? I don't know. But what we're going to do is we're going to trigger it by making a call to that webhook. So you remember the webhook itself, we had this URL. Okay, now gate is actually the server that we are running on. And we are running from actually from localhost 8084. So this is our URL. We're calling post, and we're sending just an empty payload because we don't care what the actual contents of it is. So I'm just going to copy that, see if we're done saving. We are, because it says in sync. I'm going to come back up here to pipelines. Nothing has happened. So now I'm going to go to my terminal. Nothing seems to have happened, but if I come back here, oh, come on, baby. Don't do this to me. All right. I'll show you I have a backup. So there. That's just as well. Video 1, demo part 1. Ha! All right. So when we fire the trigger, which we do right here, we come back, we look at the pipeline, and we can see that it went ahead and fired the trigger. Why didn't it do it for me? I have no idea. I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't have time to figure it out. But you can see here, trigger fire, that was the message that we had sent out. The other two messages are left over from triggers that are already running. We'll get rid of them. Don't worry about it. OK, so because we are running short, I'm going to go ahead and run the other demos out of the videos as well so that we can skip ahead. If I can get out of this. Oh, that's not the real one. Like, why isn't that working? Because that's not really your Finder. That's why. Duh. All right. So, second demo. Let's just kind of talk about what happened. The demo gods. Oh, you little. There it is. See, it did fire after all. It just took a minute. All right. So, so that was that. So now let's talk about pipeline variables. Why might we want to do this? So in this case, we're going to show an example of making a call to an outside script. Why? Well, maybe you want to periodically check and see, is there a better way to do this? And if there is, you want to implement it. If there isn't, then just don't do anything. So in this case, and there's lots of reasons why you might want to do this. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a cron trigger. So we'll go back to pipelines. We're going to create a new one. We're going to call it cron. Create. And In this case, we're still adding a trigger, and we're going to say cron every 1 minute. Okay, and then for the stage, what we're going to do is we're going to create a webhook called check for improvement. Okay, check for improvement. And in this case, we're still going to make a call. Hold on. Oh, see what happens when you get nervous. Okay. In this case, though, we're not sending a payload like we were before. We are just sending a GET request, but we're going to do something a little different. What we're going to do here is we're going to tell it we want to wait for completion. So you can have a long-running process that gives off lots of information and then finally comes to an end. There's lots of different places to get that from. I'm not going to worry about it right now. The point is, so our sample looks like this. Make that a little bigger. It's just a simple JSON script, and it just basically works its way from 0 to 10 and then randomly gives us up or down. And then once it gets to up or down, and then it gives us done. So since we're at the root, we're going to say the status is at root current. And we could have a location for the percentage done if you want to have progress bars or whatever. I'm not going to worry about that. But let's say for success, we want to use up. And for failure, we want to use down. And it's done at when it says done. All right. So we want to evaluate the results regardless of what happens. So we're going to say if this stage fails, that is, if it hits down, we want to ignore the failure. Okay? So we're going to do that. Now, once we get done with that, we're going to go ahead and create a record of success or failure. And we'll do that by creating 2 stages. Okay, so we've got, these are the same scripts that we used before, only in this case, we're saying action is implement improvement, and we're not waiting for completion, but we only want this to fire if we really want to implement the improvement, if it came with up instead of with down. In other words, we only want it to fire if check for improvement succeeded. So the way that we do that is we can create an expression which we're going to grab right here, and then I'll show you what it is. So we're going to do a conditional on this expression. We're going to say, all right, in the $ brackets is our expression. We've got the stage helper function. We're going to use the check for improvement stage. We want the status property of it. And we're going to convert that to a string because it's actually an enumerator. And we want it to be succeeded. If that's all true, then we want this stage to fire. We'll give it a second stage for failure. All right, so webhook. OK, we'll say post, action, abandon, changes. And we only want that if the condition is, if the condition of that stage was failed, failed underscore continue, okay? Because that's what it would be in that case. So method must be here. I forgot to set the method to post. All right, so we'll set the method to post. And while that's saving, because it takes a minute to save, does anybody have any questions? OK, either I've completely confused you. Yes, sir.
How do you know what the variables to check for?
Yeah, so hold that thought, because we're going to see that on the next one, on the next example. There were some other questions over there on that side.
Just pointed to him. I just pointed to the other question.
Oh, OK. So we'll get that in a minute. OK, well, there we go. This is saved anyway, so we'll move forward. All right, now we can wait for this to trigger on its own, or we can go ahead and start the manual run, which I'm going to do because we don't have time to wait for it. So you can see here now we've got 3 stages. We've got our check for improvement, we've got success, and then we've got failure, which I forgot to rename. Now, you can see here this is orange because it came up with canceled, but it still continued on. So we can see the status was failed continue. And it only gave us that webhook. So if I went ahead and looked at our recording file, I can see that it's only giving us this abandon changes method and not implement optimization. Okay? So, all right. So let's move right along here. So we can see it ran again. It's giving us failure again. Let's see if we can get a success in here. Come on. That script takes about 10 seconds. Why? I don't know. And I wrote it, so I should know. But I don't. OK, there you go. So there's a successful one. And we can see, there you go, implement improvement. OK? So, all right. So that is our second example. Now let's talk about our third example. Now, conditional stages. What if it's not that simple? In this case, we've just got one stage that we were trying to talk about. So we can do that. We've got 2 choices: either it failed or it succeeded, and we only got one stage. Well, what if we got like 3 or 4 choices? What if we want a policy agent or some other script that's going to tell us what environment we should use, or what artifact we should use, or what action we should take? Maybe there's 12 different options. We're going to show an example in this case of a script, of a pipeline that has 3 different options. Okay, so we've got a sample policy agent, which I will show you in a minute while the pipeline is saving. So let's go back to pipelines. We're going to create a new one, and I'm going to say policy agent. Okay. Now, so in this case, I'm going to add the call out to the policy agent. So I'm going to say, all right, first thing I want to do is I'm going to do a webhook again. Yes, I'm doing all webhooks today. And I'm going to say, what am I supposed to call that? Oh, it doesn't matter. OK. And I'm going to call it get environment. OK. I'm going to call it get environment and get the URL in here. OK, and we just want to do a get. And we're not going to wait for completion because we're just getting one value back. All right, now, the thing about this one is we're going to go ahead and save this one and run it first. OK, now our policy agent in this case is not really a policy agent. It's just a conditional file that just randomly selects an environment for us to use. 50% of the time it goes to OpenStack, 25% of the time it goes to AWS, 25% of the time it goes to Google. It doesn't matter. The point here is this script is completely arbitrary. You can make this whatever you want. Whatever logic you want to implement, you can. OK? Now, all right, so I'm going to come back here. And let's see if we're saved. Yes, we are. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to run this. Now, the reason I'm running this is because I want to answer this guy's question. Now, so I spent a good deal of time trying to figure out what the variables were and what the structure of everything was. And then I realized there was an easy way for me to find out. So you see here, by getting the details, you can see what's going on and what the status was and all that. There's also a handy-dandy little link here called source. And if you click that link, it gives you this jumble of text that is, I don't know about you, but I can't read it. However, it is valid JSON. So if I come over here and drop it into JSON lint, it suddenly, by the way, support JSON lint, please, because it's wonderful. Anyway, it gives you the actual structure. Now, this is called the execution. OK, so within this execution, it has all of these properties. One of the properties is the stages. OK, so within the stages, you can have multiple stages. In this case, we only really worry about the first one, which would be stage 0. And we're looking at the context. Now, we can see here that it returned GCE in the build info, but we don't want to use it from there because we have a deprecation warning that says go to the webhook key. OK, well, let's go down to the webhook key. Oh, there it is, webhook, body, GCE. So we want stages 0, context, webhook, body. So let's go ahead and go back to our, go ahead and go back to our pipeline. So we're going to create a new stage. In this case, we're going to use a precondition stage. OK, we're going to say, all right, we're going to check preconditions. And we're going to add a precondition. This is some of the built-in intelligence of Spinnaker. You can look at cluster size, whatever. I don't care about any of that right now. I just want to check this arbitrary expression. And my arbitrary expression, which I'm not going to type, is exactly what we were talking about a minute ago. It is the execution, stages 0, context, webhook, body, turning that into a string. And in this case, this is OpenStack. We do not want to fail the pipeline if this is not true, because we're going to have 3 of these. OK, so I'm going to say update. And in this case, I'm going to say check for OpenStack. OK, now, if this works, I'm going to want to record the fact that it is OpenStack. So I'm going to say record OpenStack. OK, and come back here. Colon // On my screen, this is so tiny, you have no idea. Tech for meremortals.com. Webhook, record, PHP. OK, post, and action. I got an extra what? Oh, yeah, I got it. Thank you. Thank you. OK. Right. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'll show you why in a minute. Questions so far? Yes, sir.
So I see that you're sort of stringing together pipelines. What about retry logic and things like that? Like, what if some of the steps are down?
Yeah, so one of the things that Spinnaker does well is one of the things about Kubernetes, for example, is you tell Kubernetes that you want to do something, and it says, you say, execute this manifest, and it says, done. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's actually done. Spinnaker, on the other hand, actually does keep track of what's gone on and did it fail, did it, so it, I'm not 100% certain on what the actual capabilities in terms of the logic that you can control is, but Spinnaker does a lot of that for you. All right, so now that this is saved, we can save ourselves a little bit of time. I'm going to copy. I am going to copy a couple of these things here. I'm going to copy the check for OpenStack stage. I'm going to make 2 copies of it. So you can see these are all the stages that we have here. And I'm also going to copy the record OpenStack and record OpenStack. And then I just want to go ahead and move things around. So this check for OpenStack, I don't want it to be at the end here. I mean, you could string them together like this, but why should you? Instead, I want this to actually be dependent on get environment. Okay, so I want it to be get environment. I want this to be GCE. I'm going to change this to look for GCE, and I'm going to get this one and do the same thing. I'm going to move it so that it's looking for get environment, and I'm going to call it AWS. Make it so it's looking for AWS. 3 minutes and 23 seconds. Let's see if we can do this. And then the record stages, this one is coming off of AWS, so we'll just make that record AWS. Record AWS. And we'll move this one to check for GCE. GCE. Record GCE. OK, so I'm going to save that. Questions while that's saving? Yeah. Go ahead.
What about, so I see you clicking through all the UIs. Can you call through programmatically through REST services to define all these pipelines, all that sort of stuff?
The pipelines are actually, I don't know if it'll let me show this at the moment, but you can actually, oops, cancel. Yeah, it won't let me go there right now without canceling the save. But you can. These are all actually stored as JSON, so you can actually store them in version control or whatever if you want to. OK, so let's come back here. Let us run this pipeline. Let's see what we get. All right, so we can see all of it. We can see it did OpenStack, record OpenStack. Let's run it again. Let's see what we get. All right, this one went to AWS. This one went to AWS again. Let's see. For some reason, it seems stuck on AWS. All right, but if we go ahead and check our file, we can see here this was our script that every minute was checking to see whether it wanted to implement an improvement or just abandon the changes. And there's our OpenStack and AWS pipeline choices. So that is that. So that brings us to the end of my demo. With 59 seconds to spare. So does anybody have any questions? That's it? Nobody's got questions? All right, well, I guess you get your minute back. Or did you have a question? No? All right, I guess you get your minute back. So feel free to hit me up on email or Twitter or tackle me after this, and we'll be all set. Thank you very much, everybody.